The clock on the dashboard of Nathan Cross's truck flickered to 3 a.m. as he finally pulled into his gravel driveway. The world was pitch black, save for the weak glow of the street lamp at the end of the road. It was a cold, biting night in the mountainous stretch of rural Oregon. The kind of cold that seemed to seep into your bones the moment you turned off the heater. Nathan sat there for a long minute, his hands still gripping the steering wheel. He didn't move. He just listened to the ticking of the engine as it cooled down and the absolute, crushing silence of the woods. He was home, really home. He had returned 3 days earlier than anyone expected. His final deployment with the Special Forces had been cut short by a diplomatic resolution that had surprised even the highest-ranking officers. Nathan didn't care about the politics of it, he just cared that he was done. After 12 years of service, 12 years of missed birthdays, cold meals, and sleeping with one eye open, he had finally submitted his retirement papers. This was it. No more missions. No more hostile environments. He was going to be a father, a husband, and a civilian. He felt like a ghost returning to a world he barely recognized. The journey had been grueling, 16 hours on a transport plane, hours of debriefing at the base, and then a 9-hour drive through the winding mountain passes. He was exhausted, the kind of bone-tired that makes your vision blurry, but the thought of seeing his daughter, Lily, had kept him awake. Lily was 7 now. He had missed her last birthday by 2 weeks, a fact that had sat like a lead weight in his stomach during every patrol. He had carried a crumpled photo of her in his vest, a picture of a little girl with messy pigtails and a gap-toothed grin. Every time things got bad over there, he'd look at that photo and tell himself he just had to make it back to her. Nathan grabbed his heavy duffel bag from the passenger seat and stepped out into the crisp air. He walked toward the front door, his footsteps silent on the porch, a habit from the field he couldn't quite shake. The house looked the same as always. The dark gray shutters his wife, Elena, had picked out, the empty flower boxes that were now filled with dead leaves, and the wooden swing set he had built for Lily 3 summers ago. He wanted to surprise them. He imagined Elena waking up, startled but happy, and Lily running down the hallway to jump into his arms. That image had been his North Star for 6 months. He reached for the door handle, expecting it to be locked. But the handle turned easily. The door wasn't even latched properly. A cold prickle of unease traveled up Nathan's spine. This was the first thing that felt wrong. He had told Elena 1,000 times to lock the doors, especially when he was away. He lived in a safe area. Sure, but safe was a relative term to a man who had seen how quickly things could turn. Nathan pushed the door open slowly. His training took over automatically. He didn't turn on the lights. He moved through the entryway like a shadow, his eyes adjusting to the dim interior. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air is thick with something you can't quite name. He walked into the kitchen and saw the mess. There were dirty dishes piled in the sink, several days' worth of mail scattered across the granite countertop, and an empty wine bottle standing on the table next to Elena's purse. Elena was usually meticulous. She hated clutter. Seeing the house in this state was like finding a map with all the landmarks moved. He moved toward the stairs, taking them one by one, avoiding the creaky boards by instinct. He reached the master bedroom. The door was wide open. Inside, he could see Elena sprawled across the bed, still dressed in her work clothes. She was fast asleep, her breathing heavy. On the nightstand sat another bottle of wine, half finished. Nathan's jaw tightened. He didn't wake her yet. First, he had to see Lily. He crossed the hallway to the door decorated with the bright pink Lily decal they had bought together. He pushed it open gently, a smile already forming on his face. The room was empty. The bed was made, perfectly made, as if no one had slept in it for days. He looked toward the corner where Lily usually kept her favorite stuffed bear, Barnaby. The bear was gone. Her little shoes, the ones with the light-up soles, weren't by the door. The room felt cold and sterile. Nathan felt a surge of adrenaline that cleared the fog of his exhaustion instantly. He strode back into the master bedroom and shook Elena's shoulder. He didn't do it gently. "Elena, wake up," he barked. She jolted, her eyes snapping open, unfocused and bloodshot. She squinted at him, shielding her eyes as if he were a bright light. "Nathan? What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be back until Friday." "Where is Lily?" Nathan asked. His voice was flat, controlled. It was the voice he used when a mission went sideways, the voice that meant there was no room for lies. Elena sat up, rubbing her temples. She looked older than she had 6 months ago. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her skin looked sallow. "What time is it?" she muttered, looking around for her phone. "It's 3 in the morning, Elena. Where is our daughter?" "She's at my mother's house," Elena said, her voice shaking slightly. "I told you in the email." "I didn't get an email," Nathan said. "And why is she at Eleanor's at 3 in the morning on a school night?" Eleanor Blackwood. Nathan had never liked his mother-in-law. She was a stern, cold woman who believed that discipline was the answer to every problem in life. She lived further up in the mountains on a sprawling property she called a retreat, but Nathan had always thought of it as a fortress of bitterness. Elena finally looked him in the eye, but she quickly looked away. Her hands were trembling. "She's been there since Monday. My mother she's helping me with her. I had some things to handle at work. It's been a stressful month, Nathan." "You weren't here." "Monday," Nathan repeated. "That was 4 days ago. Lily is 7 years old. She doesn't need a retreat. She needs to be in her bed." Nathan had spent 12 years reading people. In his line of work, being able to tell when someone was lying was the difference between life and death. And right now, every instinct he had was screaming. Elena wasn't just tired. She was terrified. "I'm going to get her," Nathan said, turning toward the door. "Nathan, wait. It's the middle of the night," Elena called out, her voice rising to a frantic pitch. "Eleanor doesn't like to be disturbed. Just wait until morning." But Nathan was already down the stairs. He didn't care about Eleanor's preferences. He didn't care about the time. He walked out to his truck, the cold air hitting him like a slap in the face. The drive to Eleanor Blackwood's property took about 45 minutes. The roads were narrow and winding, cutting through dense forests of Douglas fir and hemlock. As he climbed higher into the mountains, the fog began to roll in, thick and gray. His mind was racing. Why hadn't Elena mentioned this on their last video call? Why was the house such a mess? Elena had always been a supermom type, someone who juggled her job and Lily with ease. Seeing her broken down like that, drinking on a Tuesday night while her daughter was miles away, made his blood run cold. He knew Eleanor ran some kind of program on her land. She called it the Path of Guidance. She marketed it to wealthy parents who had difficult children. She claimed she used nature and spiritual discipline to realign their behavior. Nathan had always thought it sounded like a scam, a way for Eleanor to feel powerful while taking money from people who didn't know how to parent. But Lily wasn't a difficult child. She was sweet, bright, and if she ever misbehaved, it was just the usual 7-year-old stuff. Nathan reached the iron gates of the Blackwood estate. They were closed, but not locked. He pushed them open and drove up the long, winding gravel driveway. When the farmhouse came into view, he noticed something that made him stop the truck. The lights were on. Every single window in the house was glowing with a harsh, yellowish light. It was nearly 4 a.m. In the middle of nowhere, there was no reason for a house to be fully lit up at this hour unless something was wrong. Nathan parked the truck and hopped out, leaving the door open. He didn't walk to the front door, he ran. Before he could even reach the porch, the door swung open. Eleanor Blackwood stood there. She was a tall, thin woman with hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. She was wearing a long, quilted robe and holding a cup of tea. She didn't look surprised to see him. She looked annoyed. "Nathan," she said, her voice as dry as parchment. "Elena said you were on your way. You always did have a flair for the dramatic." "Where is my daughter, Eleanor?" Nathan demanded. He tried to push past her, but she stepped into his path, surprisingly strong for her age. "She is sleeping," Eleanor said firmly, "and you are disturbing the peace of this sanctuary. I suggest you go back down the mountain and return at a civilized hour." I'm not going anywhere without Lily, Nathan said, his voice dropping an octave. This was the voice that made grown men in combat zones back down. He didn't wait for her to move this time. He put his hand on her shoulder and firmly moved her to the side. As he stepped into the foyer, a strange smell hit him. It was a mixture of heavy bleach and something else. Something sweet and cloying, like rotting fruit hidden under a pile of laundry. "Lily!" Nathan shouted. "You'll wake the other children," Eleanor snapped, following him into the hallway. Nathan froze. "What other children?" "The students," Eleanor said, smoothing her robe. "Their parents send them here for guidance. We have a full house this month. Lily is simply partaking in the curriculum." She was being difficult. Elena felt she needed a firm hand. Nathan felt a wave of nausea. "Lily? Difficult? Where is she?" Eleanor sighed, as if she were explaining something to a slow child. "She is in the back. She is in the reflection garden." She needed some time alone to think about her attitude toward her mother. Nathan didn't ask what a reflection garden was. He turned and sprinted through the kitchen toward the back door. He burst out into the night, the freezing mountain air stinging his lungs. The backyard was huge, bordering a dark, impenetrable forest. In the moonlight, he could see various structures: sheds, small cabins, and rows of what looked like wooden boxes. "Lily!" he roared, his voice echoing off the trees. A small, weak sound drifted back to him. It wasn't a shout. It was a whimper. Nathan pulled his phone from his pocket and flicked on the flashlight. He swung the beam across the yard, searching for the source of the sound. The light caught something about 30 yards away. It was a hole. Nathan ran toward it, his heart hammering against his ribs. As he reached the edge, the beam of his light fell into the pit. The hole was about 4 feet deep. The bottom was filled with a few inches of muddy water. And there, huddled in the corner, shivering violently in her thin pajamas, was Lily. "Daddy?" she whispered. Her voice was so small, so fragile, that it nearly broke him right then and there. Nathan didn't think. He jumped into the hole. Nathan didn't just jump into that hole, he practically flew. The moment his boots hit the muddy bottom, he felt the freezing slush soak into his socks. But he didn't care. His only focus was the tiny, trembling girl in the corner. He reached out and scooped Lily into his arms, pulling her tight against his chest. She was ice cold, her skin pale and waxy in the beam of his flashlight. Her pajamas were completely saturated with mud and the frigid night dew. "I've got you, baby. I've got you," Nathan whispered, his voice thick with a mixture of relief and a growing, white-hot rage. Lily didn't say a word at first. She just buried her face in the crook of his neck and clung to him with a strength that surprised him. Her small hands balled into fists against his shirt. Nathan climbed out of the pit with her in one arm, his muscles straining as he hoisted them both back onto level ground. The mountain air felt even colder now that they were out of the sheltered hole. Nathan immediately stripped off his heavy tactical jacket and wrapped it around her, swaddling her like an infant to trap whatever body heat she had left. She was shaking so violently that her teeth were literally chattering together, a rhythmic clicking sound that made Nathan's heart ache. He sat on the grass for a second, rubbing her arms through the jacket, trying to get her blood flowing. "How long have you been out here, Lily?" he asked softly. "I don't know," she sobbed, finally finding her voice. The words came out in broken, jagged pieces. "Grandma said. She said bad girls have to sleep in graves. She said I had to learn to be quiet." Nathan felt a surge of fury so intense it made his vision go dark for a split second. He took a deep, steadying breath, forcing himself to remain calm for his daughter. She needed a father right now, not a soldier lost in rage. "You aren't a bad girl, Lily. Do you hear me? You're the best girl in the world." "Daddy," Lily whispered, pulling back just enough to look at him. Her eyes were wide, filled with a primal kind of terror that no 7-year-old should ever know. "Don't look in the other hole. Please don't look." Nathan's blood ran cold. The other hole. He stood up, still holding Lily tightly against his hip, and swept his flashlight beam across the dark expanse of the backyard. About 20 feet away, the light caught on a series of rough wooden planks laid flat against the ground. They were weighted down with heavy stones, clearly meant to cover something up. "Lily, I need you to do something for me," Nathan said, his voice dropping into that low, mission-ready tone. "I need you to close your eyes. Close them tight and don't open them until I tell you. Can you do that?" She nodded obediently against his shoulder, squeezing her eyes shut. Nathan walked toward the planks. Each step felt like he was walking through lead. When he reached the edge of the second hole, a smell hit him. A thick, cloying stench of rot, damp earth, and some kind of harsh chemical like lye or bleach. It was a smell he recognized from his time overseas, the smell of things that were never meant to be uncovered. Holding Lily with his left arm, he used his right boot to kick aside the heavy stones and shove the wooden planks away. He shone the light down. The beam cut through the darkness and revealed a nightmare. It wasn't just a pit. It was a shallow grave. At the bottom, partially covered by the shifting Oregon soil, were bones. They were small, unmistakably the bones of a child. A small skull was visible, tilted to the side as if watching him. Scattered around the remains were scraps of colorful fabric, maybe a shirt or a dress, and a glint of metal caught the light. Nathan leaned down further, his breath hitching in his throat. It was a metal tag similar to a military dog tag, hanging from a rusted chain. He zoomed his phone camera in on it. Engraved in the metal were the words, "Caitlin Lowry." For a moment, Nathan forgot how to breathe. This wasn't just discipline or a strict program. This was a graveyard. His training kicked in, that cold, robotic efficiency that allows a soldier to function in the middle of a disaster. He didn't scream. He didn't vomit. He took 3 clear photos of the grave, the bones, and the name on the tag, making sure the GPS coordinates were embedded in the metadata. Then, he carefully slid the planks back over the hole, hiding the horror from the moonlight once again. "Okay, baby, keep your eyes shut," he murmured to Lily as he turned and began a fast, purposeful walk back toward the farmhouse. He didn't go through the front door this time. He went through the kitchen, his boots thudding loudly on the hardwood floors. Eleanor Blackwood was still there, sitting at the kitchen table with her cup of tea, looking as if she were waiting for a guest to arrive for a polite afternoon chat. "She's being dramatic, Nathan," Eleanor said, not even looking up as he entered. "She's only been out there an hour. The cold is a teacher. It teaches them humility." Nathan stopped in the middle of the kitchen. If he hadn't been holding Lily, he wasn't sure what he would have done. His voice, when he finally spoke, was so cold it could have cut through glass. "Do not move," Nathan said. "Do not speak. Do not even think about leaving this room. Because if you do, I will find you, and you will learn exactly what I learned in the places I've been." Eleanor finally looked up, and for the first time, a flicker of genuine fear crossed her face. She saw the look in Nathan's eyes, the look of a man who had seen the end of the world and was currently standing in the middle of it. Nathan didn't wait for a response. He carried Lily out to the truck, his movements fluid and fast. He placed her in the passenger seat and immediately cranked the engine, turning the heater up to its maximum setting. He pulled a spare wool blanket from behind the seat and wrapped it over the jacket he'd already given her. "Baby, listen to me," he said, kneeling on the floorboard so he was at eye level with her. "You are safe now. I am never letting anyone hurt you again. I'm going to take you somewhere warm, okay?" Lily nodded, her shivering finally starting to subside, though her eyes were still glazed with shock. "Lily, can you tell me who Caitlin Lowry is?" Nathan asked, his voice as gentle as he could make it. Lily's eyes went wide, and she began to cry again, silent tears tracking through the mud on her cheeks. "You looked. I told you not to look." "I know, honey. I'm sorry. But I need to know." "She was here last year," Lily whispered. "She was bad too. Grandma said she ran away. But I heard her. I heard her screaming one night. And then she was gone. Grandma told me if I was bad, I'd end up like the girls who run away." Nathan reached out and stroked her hair. "Nobody is running away tonight, Lily. Nobody." He closed the passenger door and walked to the front of the truck, pulling his phone out. He didn't call the local police. He didn't know who Eleanor might have in her pocket in this small mountain town. Instead, he called the only person he knew he could trust with his life. Officer Marcus Reed answered on the third ring. Marcus was a former ranger who had served with Nathan years ago before moving back to Oregon to work in law enforcement. "Reed." The voice crackled over the line. "Marcus, it's Nathan Cross. I need you to get to the Blackwood estate at 4782 Laurel Ridge Road right now," Nathan said, his voice a low growl. "Bring backup, lots of it, and call the state police, maybe even the FBI." There was a brief silence on the other end, then the sound of a chair scraping against a floor. "Nathan? I thought you were still overseas. What's going on?" "I just found a dead child in a hole on my mother-in-law's property, Marcus," Nathan said, his eyes fixed on the farmhouse where Eleanor was still sitting. "And my daughter was in a pit right next to it. There might be more. I think there are other kids here." "My God," Marcus whispered. Then his voice shifted into professional mode. "I'm 10 minutes away. I'm calling it in now. Nathan, do not hang up. Stay on the line." Nathan looked toward the house. Eleanor was standing at the window now, silhouetted by the light. She didn't look worried. She didn't look like a woman who was about to be arrested for murder. She looked angry, as if Nathan were a nuisance who had ruined her evening. "Marcus, listen," Nathan said, watching Eleanor's shadow. "She runs some kind of discipline program for kids. She's got them hidden here somewhere. My daughter said she'd been out there for hours, but who knows how long it's really been. I found a tag for a girl named Caitlin Lowry. She's been missing for a year. We're coming, Nathan. Get Lily out of there. Get to the end of the driveway and wait for us," Marcus ordered. +1. "I can't do that, Marcus," Nathan said. "I'm not leaving until I know every other kid in that house is safe." "Nathan, that's an order. Do not go back in that house," Marcus shouted. But Nathan was already moving. He clicked the phone off and walked back to the driver's side of the truck. He looked at Lily, who was watching him with wide, terrified eyes. "Baby, I need you to do one more brave thing for me," he said. "I need you to lock these doors. Stay in the truck. Keep the heat on high. I'm gonna go get the other kids, and then we're leaving for good. Okay?" "Daddy, don't leave," she whimpered. "I'll be right back. I promise," Nathan said, leaning in to kiss her forehead. "Lock the doors. If anyone other than me or a police officer comes near this truck, you honk that horn as loud as you can. Understood?" Lily nodded, her face set in a look of grim determination. She reached over and pushed the lock button. Nathan heard the satisfying thud of the locks engaging. He turned toward the farmhouse. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by a cold, sharpened clarity. He wasn't a tired father anymore. He was a soldier clearing a hostile building, and he was going to make sure that Eleanor Blackwood never had the chance to hurt another child again. As he walked toward the porch, he saw the front door open. Eleanor wasn't hiding anymore. She was standing there, her face twisted in a sneer. "You have no right to interfere with my work, Nathan," she hissed as he approached. "Where are the other kids, Eleanor?" Nathan asked, his voice dangerously low. "They are sleeping. They are fine," she snapped. "That hole is a therapeutic technique. Teaches them to reflect on their sins. It's perfectly legal. Their parents signed contracts." Nathan didn't even slow down. He crossed the porch in 2 long strides. He didn't touch her, but the sheer force of his presence made her stumble back into the hallway. "I'm going to ask you one more time," Nathan said, stepping into the foyer. "Where are the kids?" "Upstairs," she muttered, her bravado finally starting to crack. "But you can't just take them. Their parents sent them to me because they couldn't handle them. I'm helping them." Nathan didn't listen. He was already headed for the stairs. Nathan didn't hesitate. He took the stairs 2 at a time, his boots thudding against the wood with a heavy, purposeful rhythm. Upstairs, the hallway was narrow and poorly lit, smelling of old dust and that sharp, medicinal scent of bleach. His eyes, trained for years to spot irregularities in hostile environments, immediately landed on the first door. It was locked from the outside. A heavy brass bolt slammed shut against the frame. He didn't reach for a key. He didn't ask permission. Nathan shifted his weight, lifted his leg, and drove his heel into the door right next to the lock. With a splintering crack that echoed through the quiet house, the frame gave way. He stepped into the room, his flashlight cutting a wide arc through the darkness. What he saw made his stomach churn. 3 children, none of them older than 10, were huddled together on thin, stained mats laid directly on the hardwood floor. There were no blankets, no pillows, and no heater to ward off the freezing mountain air that seeped through the walls. He looked toward the window and realized why the room felt so much like a cage. Iron bars had been bolted to the outside of the glass. "Wake up," Nathan said, keeping his voice low and as gentle as he could manage while his heart was still thundering in his ears. "My name is Nathan. I'm a soldier, and I'm here to take you home. The police are on their way. You're going to be okay." The children scrambled up, their eyes wide and hollow. It was a look Nathan had seen before, usually in war zones or refugee camps. The look of a person who has seen too much and expected nothing but pain from the world. A small boy, shivering so hard he could barely stand, looked up at him. "Are you taking us home?" he whispered. "Yes," Nathan promised. "Right now." He led them down the stairs, shielding them as they passed Eleanor, who had finally stood up from the kitchen table. She tried to block the exit, her face contorted with indignation. "You can't do this, Nathan. Their parents signed contracts. This is legal discipline." Nathan didn't even slow down. He physically lifted the woman, who felt as light and fragile as a bundle of dry sticks, and set her aside so the children could pass. He ushered them out onto the porch just as the night was shattered by the blue and red strobe of police lights. For patrol cars roared up the gravel driveway, kicking up clouds of dust. Marcus Reed was the first one out, his heavy boots crunching on the gravel. He took one look at Nathan, then at the shivering children huddled on the porch, and immediately grabbed the radio on his shoulder. "Dispatch, I need ambulances at this location. Multiple minors, signs of severe abuse and neglect. Get the FBI and CPS on the line now." The next few hours were a chaotic blur of noise and light. More police arrived, followed by black SUVs filled with federal agents. Nathan sat on the tailgate of his truck, his arm wrapped around Lily, who refused to let go of him even for a second. He watched as investigators swarmed the property with high-powered lights and shovels. A team of officers moved into the house and found a hidden door in the basement. Down there, in a room that smelled like damp concrete and despair, they found 6 more children. They were malnourished, covered in bruises, and absolutely terrified. As they were led out to the waiting ambulances, they all began to tell the same stories. Stories about the holes in the backyard, about being left in the dark for days as punishment, and about the children who had run away but never actually left the mountain. By dawn, the investigators had found 3 more graves. Eleanor Blackwood was led out of the house in handcuffs. Even then, she didn't look remorseful. She kept shouting at the officers, claiming she was a spiritual guide, and that everything she did was within the bounds of the contracts the parents had signed. Nathan watched her go, a cold, hard knot of hatred forming in his chest. Marcus walked over to Nathan's truck as the sun began to peek over the jagged mountain peaks. His face was grim, his eyes tired. "They're going to need statements from you and Lily, Nathan," he said quietly. "Not today," Nathan replied, pulling Lily closer. "She needs a doctor first. She needs to be somewhere safe." Marcus nodded understandingly. "We've already identified one of the bodies. Caitlin Lowry. She went missing from the city a year ago. She was only 9 years old. Her parents thought she was at a summer camp." He shook his head. "We're still working on the other 3. "Marcus," Nathan said, his voice dropping. "How did this happen? How did no one know?" "I don't know yet," Marcus admitted. "But we're going to find out. We've already called your wife, Nathan. We need to know what she knew." The mention of Elena, Sasha, hit Nathan like a physical blow. He looked at his daughter, who was finally drifting into a shallow, fitful sleep against his chest. He thought about Elena back at the house, drinking wine while her daughter was buried in a hole. He thought about how she had sent Lily to this nightmare because she couldn't handle a normal 7-year-old. "I'm going to find out too," Nathan said, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. He didn't go back to the house they had bought together. Instead, he drove to a hotel in the next town over, a place with warm rooms, bright lights, and room service. He checked into a suite with 2 beds and stayed by Lily's side as a hospital doctor came to examine her. The doctor was a kind woman with gentle hands, but her face grew harder with every bruise she documented. Mild hypothermia, significant bruising, and clear signs of psychological trauma, she noted quietly to Nathan as they stood by the door. "She's going to need therapy. Children don't just get over something like this." Nathan sat by the window while Lily slept. He opened his laptop and began to do the work he should have done months ago. He searched for The Path of Guidance and Eleanor Blackwood. On the surface, it looked perfect. A professional website filled with testimonials from grateful parents and photos of children smiling in the woods. But as he dug deeper into the dark corners of the internet, into the forums where parents whispered about the things they couldn't explain, the truth started to leak out. He found stories of kids returning home silent and terrified, of parents who were told their complaints were just the drama of a difficult child. He found a news article from 3 years ago about a county investigation that had been suddenly dropped. The social worker who had cleared the property, a woman named Phyllis Vance, had retired shortly after and bought a house in Florida. A house far more expensive than a government pension should allow. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed was horrifying. Eleanor hadn't just been a cruel woman. She had been the head of a system, protected by people who were paid to look the other way. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Elena. "Where are you? The police were here asking about my mother. Nathan, talk to me." Nathan didn't reply. Instead, he looked at the photos he had taken of the graves. He memorized every detail, the dirt, the bones, the metal tag. He opened a new document and began to write down everything Lily had told him, everything he had seen, and every name he found in his research. He wasn't just a father protecting his child anymore. He was a man building a case. And he realized that the enemy wasn't just in the mountains of Oregon. The true enemy had been hiding in plain sight, right in his own home. Around noon, Lily woke up. She looked around the bright hotel room, panic flaring in her eyes for a second until she saw Nathan sitting in the chair. She relaxed, but her voice was hard when she spoke. "Is Grandma in jail?" she asked. "Yes," Nathan said. "Good," Lily whispered. She sat up slowly, clutching the blanket around her. "Daddy? Are we going back to Mommy?" Nathan felt a cold weight settle in his chest. He moved to the edge of her bed and took her hand. "I need you to tell me the truth, Lily, even if it hurts. Did Mommy know? Did she know about the holes?" Lily's eyes filled with tears, and she began to sob. "She said I was being bad. She said Grandma could teach me how to be good. She took me there and told Grandma I needed to learn respect." "What did you do, Lily?" Nathan asked, his heart breaking. "What was so bad?" "I didn't want to eat my vegetables," Lily cried. "And I talked back when she told me to clean my room. I didn't mean to be bad, Daddy. I just wanted you to come home." Nathan pulled her into a tight hug, his face set like stone. Elena had sent their daughter to a torture camp because of vegetables. Because she was a normal 7-year-old child. "You weren't bad, Lily," he said firmly. "What Mommy did was wrong. What Grandma did was evil. But you are staying with me now. Forever. I promise." There was a knock on the door. Nathan looked through the peephole and saw Marcus Reed. He let him in. "We found more," Marcus said, his voice flat. "For graves so far. Caitlin Lowry, like we thought. A boy named Jaden Banks who went missing 2 years ago. Another girl we haven't identified yet. And the 4th. Marcus paused, looking sick. "The 4th is recent. A boy named Caleb Quinn. He'd only been there a week." Nathan stared at him. "How many kids, Marcus?" "Eleanor's records say she's had over 100 kids go through that place in 5 years," Marcus said. "Most made it out. but we're checking every single name against missing persons reports. Nathan looked at his sleeping daughter. The nightmare was far from over. It was only just beginning. The hotel room was filled with the soft, rhythmic sound of Lily's breathing. But for Nathan, the air felt electric and heavy. He sat by the window, the glow of his laptop screen reflecting in the dark glass. Outside, the world was waking up, but he felt like he was descending into a different kind of darkness. One made of spreadsheets, bank records, and lies. He looked at Lily, still wrapped in that hotel blanket, and saw the faint yellowing bruises on her arms. The doctor had been clear. She was physically healing from the cold and the damp, but the trauma was a deeper wound that wouldn't close overnight. Nathan knew he couldn't do this halfway anymore. He opened his military email and typed a short, final message. After 12 years of service and countless missions, he was officially resigning. The army didn't need him anymore, but Lily did. He hit send, feeling a strange sense of finality. He was no longer a soldier for his country. He was now a soldier for his daughter. With his military ties severed, he turned his full attention back to the path of guidance. He stared at the website he had briefly glanced at months ago. It was polished and professional, decorated with Bible verses about redemption and discipline. There were photos of happy children hiking through the very woods where he had just found graves. He felt a wave of nausea. He realized he had trusted Elena blindly when she said her mother was helping troubled kids. He had been so focused on the enemies overseas that he hadn't seen the predator in his own family. But as he dug past the official website and into parent forums and review sites, the facade crumbled. He found a post from a mother 3 years ago that stopped his heart. She wrote about sending her daughter there for 3 months, only for the girl to return home unable to speak, crying every time she saw a shovel. When the mother finally got her to talk, the girl whispered that if she told the truth, they would put her under the ground. The parents had thought she was just being dramatic. Now that mother was posting on a memorial page. Another father described his son returning home after only a week, having lost 11 pounds and covered in marks that Eleanor claimed were spiritual marks of discipline. The local police had told the father it was a family matter and refused to investigate. Why didn't anyone stop her? Nathan whispered to the empty room. He found a lead when he searched for the county's social services records. 3 years ago, an investigator named Phyllis Vance had been sent to the property following a complaint. Her report was glowing, stating there was nothing irregular, and dismissing the parents as disgruntled. Shortly after that report was filed, Phyllis Vance had retired and moved to a luxury home in Florida, a house that a social worker's pension could never buy. His phone buzzed, vibrating against the wooden desk. The name on the screen was Xavier Holt. Xavier was a man Nathan had served with for 8 years. They were brothers in every sense of the word. Marcus called me. Xavier's voice was steady, but Nathan could hear the underlying tension. He said you found something big. He said it was bad, Nathan. It's worse than bad, Xavier, Nathan said, leaning back and rubbing his eyes. I found a graveyard. My daughter was in a pit. There was a long silence on the other end, the kind of silence only soldiers understand when the news is too heavy for words. Where are you? Xavier finally asked. I'm at a hotel in town. I need to know who I can trust, Nathan admitted. Marcus is solid, but I think the rot goes deep. This social worker, Phyllis Vance. She was paid off. I need you to do some digging for me, off the books. Follow the money. See where Eleanor Blackwood is hiding her cash. I can be there in 6 hours, Xavier said. I'll start pulling records now. Nathan, how is Lily? She's alive, Nathan said, looking at her small form on the bed. That's all that matters right now. After hanging up, Nathan felt the silence of the room grow heavy again. He looked at his phone and saw dozens of missed calls and messages from Elena. Where are you? What is happening? The police are taking my mother's things. He didn't answer her. Instead, he pulled up the photos of the child's remains he had found in the backyard, the metal tag with the name Caitlin Lowry. He began to type out a detailed statement, documenting every second of the night, every word Eleanor had said, and every bruise on Lily's body. Around 3 p.m., Lily stirred and woke up. She looked around the unfamiliar hotel room, and for a split second, Nathan saw that flash of pure, primal panic in her eyes again. Then she saw him, and the tension left her body as she sank back into the pillows. "Hey, baby," Nathan said, moving to sit on the edge of her bed. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," she said softly. She looked at him with an intensity that seemed too old for a 7-year-old. "Is Grandma really never coming back?" "Never," Nathan promised. "Good," Lily whispered. Then she hesitated, her voice trembling. "Daddy, do I have to go back to Mommy?" Nathan felt a cold stone settle in his chest. He took her hand, his thumb stroking her knuckles. "I need to ask you something, Lily, and I need the absolute truth, okay? Even if you think it might make me sad." Lily nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "Did Mommy know?" Nathan asked. "Did she know Grandma was putting kids in holes?" Lily started to cry, the tears spilling over and soaking into her blanket. "She said I was being bad. She said I wasn't obeying. She told me Grandma could teach me how to be good. She took me there on Tuesday and told Grandma I needed to learn respect." Nathan felt his jaw lock so tight it ached. "What did you do, Lily? What was so bad that she took you there?" "I didn't want to eat my vegetables," Lily sobbed, her words barely coherent. "And I talked back when she told me to clean my room. I didn't mean to be bad, Daddy. I just wanted you to come home." Nathan pulled her into a crushing hug, holding her while she wept into his shirt. Above her head, his face was a mask of cold fury. Elena had sent their daughter to a woman who buried children, all because of vegetables and a messy room. She had known her mother was dangerous, and she had sent Lily there anyway. "You weren't bad, Lily," Nathan said, his voice a low, steady vibration. "You were just being a kid. What Mommy did was wrong. What Grandma did was evil. But you're staying with me now." A knock at the door made Nathan freeze, his hand instinctively reaching for the space where his sidearm usually sat. He checked the peephole and saw Marcus Reed. He opened the door, letting the officer in. Marcus looked like he hadn't slept in days. "We've identified more of the graves," Marcus said, pulling out a notepad. "For children total so far. Caitlin Lowry, 9 years old. Jaden Banks, 10 years old. He's been missing for 2 years. The parents were told he was at a boarding school in Europe. The third is a girl, maybe 8, we're still checking records. And the fourth is a boy named Caleb Quinn. He'd only been at the retreat for a week." Nathan stared at the floor. "How many more, Marcus?" "Eleanor is claiming she's had over 100 kids in the last 5 years, Marcus said grimly. "We're checking every name against every missing persons report in the state. But Nathan, there's more. We found her financial records. And she was charging parents $50,000 for a 3-month program," Marcus said. "Most of it was paid in cash. We're looking at millions of dollars moving through shell companies. She didn't do this alone, Nathan. Someone was making the legal problems go away." "Phyllis Vance," Nathan said, remembering the social worker in Florida. "She's one of them," Marcus agreed. "But the FBI is looking into a name that's going to hit you hard. Eleanor has a brother, Nathan. His name is Arthur Sterling." Nathan felt the air leave his lungs. He knew that name. Everyone in the county knew that name. "Arthur Sterling is a county judge," Marcus said, his voice barely a whisper. "He handles the juvenile cases. He's the one who was dismissing the complaints against his sister's property for years." The puzzle was finally complete, and it was a masterpiece of corruption. A judge to protect the legal side, a social worker to bury the investigations, and a grandmother to run the discipline camp. And somewhere in the middle of it all was Nathan's wife, who had used her own daughter as a pawn in this sick game. Nathan looked at Marcus, his eyes cold and focused. "I don't care who they are or how much power they have. I want every single one of them to go down." "The FBI is already building the RICO case," Marcus assured him. "But Nathan, you need to watch your back. These people have everything to lose." "I'm not the one who should be afraid," Nathan said. After Marcus left, Nathan sat back down at his laptop. He had work to do before Xavier arrived. He opened an encrypted email from his old military contact and began looking at the property records for Arthur Sterling. If a judge was involved, this was no longer just a crime. It was an organized conspiracy. He looked at Lily, who had fallen back into a light sleep, her hand still clutching the edge of his sleeve. He realized the army had trained him to fight enemies in distant lands, but he had finally found the most dangerous enemy of all. They were right here, in the quiet mountain towns of Oregon, hiding behind suits and robes and religious slogans. Nathan Cross was done being a soldier for the government, but he was just getting started as a father seeking justice. And he knew one thing for certain. He was going to make them all pay. The next morning, Nathan didn't take Lily back to their house. He couldn't risk it. Instead, he drove her to a quiet, unassuming apartment located above a small bookstore in town. The place was owned by a retired police officer who owed Marcus a favor, and Marcus had arranged for a female officer named Jeanette to stay there with her. The bookstore downstairs was a maze of old shelves and the smell of paper, a world away from the cold mud of the mountain. "I don't want you to go, Daddy," Lily said, clutching her stuffed bear, Barnaby, tightly against her chest. Nathan knelt down so he was at her level, his heart aching at the smallness of her. "I'll be back tonight, I promise. Jeanette is going to stay with you, and there's a police officer downstairs. You're safe here. I just have to go finish something so the people who hurt you can never hurt anyone again." Lily was quiet for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. "Are you going to bring Mommy?" she asked softly. Nathan's jaw tightened, a sharp pain radiating through his teeth. "Do you want to see her?" Lily thought about it, then slowly shook her head. "Not yet. Maybe never." That answer hit Nathan harder than any physical blow he had ever taken. He kissed her forehead, walked out the door, and locked all 3 deadbolts behind him. The heaviness he felt as he walked down the stairs didn't last long. By the time he reached his truck, it had turned into a cold, focused fury. He had targets now. Eleanor was already in a cell, but she was just the beginning. He arrived at his house at 9 a.m. Elena's car was in the driveway, and for a moment he just sat there, staring at the front door of the home they had built together. It felt like a stage set, a fake front for a life that had never really existed. He walked inside, his boots loud on the hardwood floors. Elena was in the kitchen. She looked like a ghost, haggard, with her hair unwashed and her eyes swollen from crying. When she saw him, she stood up quickly, her hands fluttering toward her face. "Nathan!" Finally, she gasped. "The police won't tell me anything. They took my mother. They're saying things that are impossible. You have to tell them. Where is Lily?" Nathan didn't move. He just stood in the doorway watching her. "I'm trying to decide if my wife is stupid or just pure evil," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. Elena flinched as if he had slapped her, her face going pale. "What? Nathan, what are you talking about? You sent our daughter to a woman who tortures children, Elena," Nathan said, each word a hammer blow. "A woman who has murdered at least 4 kids that we know of. You took Lily there on Tuesday and told her grandmother she needed to learn respect." "I didn't. It wasn't like that," Elena cried, her voice rising. "My mother's program is strict, but it works. It helps troubled kids." Nathan crossed the kitchen in 2 steps, and the sheer intensity of his presence made Elena stumble back against the counter. "Lily is not troubled, Elena. She is 7 years old. She didn't want to eat her vegetables. That is not a crisis. That is a normal Tuesday. She was getting out of control." Elena screamed back, her face contorting. "Talking back, not obeying. I couldn't handle it while you were gone." "So you sent her to be buried alive in a hole?" Elena's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out for a long moment. No. Mom would not do that. I pulled her out of that hole myself," Nathan snarled. It was 2 o'clock in the morning and it was freezing. She had been standing in mud and ice water for over an hour, terrified. And do you know what she said? She told me not to look in the other hole because she was scared I'd see the dead girl. Nathan pulled out his phone and shoved it toward her, displaying the photo of Caitlin Lowry's metal tag lying among the bones. Elena looked at it for 1 second before she turned green and ran to the sink, throwing up violently. When she finally stood up, wiping her mouth, she looked like she was about to collapse. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Nathan, I swear on my life, I didn't know she was killing anyone. But you knew she was hurting them," Nathan countered, his voice dripping with disgust. "You knew she was breaking them. Melody stopped talking to your mother years ago because she knew Eleanor was dangerous. You kept Lily away from her most of the time because you knew it, too. But the moment she became an inconvenience to you, you threw her to the wolves. I was just so tired." Elena sobbed, sliding down the cabinets until she was sitting on the floor. "You weren't here, and she was so difficult, and I thought a few days would teach her discipline." "Pack your things," Nathan said, his voice turning ice cold. Elena looked up, her eyes wide with shock. "What? This is my house too." "I don't care," Nathan said. "You are leaving today. If you fight me on this, I will make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what you did. Your job, your friends. Everyone will know you sent your daughter to a murder camp." He leaned over her, his shadow covering her completely. "You're going to get a lawyer. You're going to agree to give me full custody. You're going to stay away from Lily unless she asks to see you, which I don't think will be anytime soon. And you are going to cooperate fully with the FBI, because if you don't, you're going to prison as an accomplice." Elena's face crumbled, and she buried her head in her hands. Nathan didn't feel a shred of pity. He walked out of the house, leaving her crying on the kitchen floor. This was the house where they had brought Lily home from the hospital, the place where he thought they were building a life, but now it was all ashes. He drove to a diner on the outskirts of town to meet Xavier. His old friend was already there, sitting in a back booth with a laptop open and a very large cup of black coffee. Xavier looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. "You look like hell, Nathan," Xavier said quietly. "I feel worse," Nathan replied, sliding into the booth. "What did you find?" Xavier pulled out a thick folder and tapped it. "Arthur Sterling, Eleanor's brother. He's been a county judge for 15 years. He handles juvenile cases and family court. I found 6 official complaints about his sister's retreat over the last 5 years. Every single one of them went to Arthur's court, and every single one was dismissed as unfounded." Nathan's hands clenched into fists under the table. He was protecting her. "It gets better," Xavier continued. "Phyllis Vance, that social worker who cleared the property 3 years ago, she's Arthur's ex-wife. I checked their bank records. She's been receiving regular payments from a company called The Path of Guidance Holdings. Do you want to guess who owns that company?" "Arthur and Eleanor," Nathan guessed. 50-50, Xavier confirmed. "The company collects the fees from parents, launders the money through different accounts, and then pays out to the trio. We're talking over $3 million in the last 5 years alone." Nathan leaned back, the scope of the corruption finally becoming clear. It was a perfect circle. Arthur provided the legal shield, Phyllis provided the state stamp of approval, and Eleanor ran the factory of misery in the mountains. "There's more," Xavier said, leaning in closer. "I found large cash withdrawals from the company accounts every month, like clockwork, on the 15th. Exactly $10,000 every time, going back 3 years. Blackmail? Or bribes?" Nathan asked. "Could be protection money for someone even higher up," Xavier suggested. "Someone who makes sure the state police don't get too curious." Nathan's phone rang. It was Marcus Reed. "Nathan, speak," Marcus said, his voice tense. "We have something. Eleanor is talking. She's trying to cut a deal for immunity by giving up everyone else. But there's something she said that you need to hear." "Tell me," Nathan said. "She claims Elena was part of the recruitment," Marcus said, and Nathan could hear the regret in his voice. "She says your wife identified families with difficult kids and recommended the program. Eleanor says Elena got a $5,000 commission for every child she sent. The diner seemed to tilt on its axis. Nathan felt like he had been punched in the gut. Elena hadn't just sent Lily there. She had been selling other people's children into that nightmare for years. "Nathan? You still there?" Marcus asked. "I'm here," Nathan said, stood up and closed his eyes. "I have to go. I need to have another conversation with my wife." He found her at her sister Melody's house. Melody opened the door, her expression hard and unforgiving. "She's in the kitchen," Melody said. "And Nathan, whatever happens next, she deserves it." Nathan walked into the kitchen. Elena was sitting at the table, a cold cup of coffee in front of her. She looked up, and the look of pure terror on her face told Nathan everything he needed to know. "The FBI talked to your mother, Elena," Nathan said, his voice a low, deadly vibration. "She's trying to save herself. She told them you got $5,000 for every kid you recruited for her. Is it true?" Elena's silence was the only answer he needed. "How many?" Nathan demanded. "How many kids did you sell into torture for cash?" I don't know," Elena whispered, her voice cracking. "Maybe 20, over 3 years. 20 children." Nathan felt a wave of cold fury so intense it left him breathless. He looked at the woman he had married and realized he didn't know her at all. Nathan stood in Melody's kitchen, the silence between him and Elena feeling like a heavy, suffocating blanket. He looked at the woman he had loved for over a decade, the woman he had trusted to protect their daughter, and all he saw now was a stranger. 20 kids, he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "You sold 20 children into that hell for a commission." Elena's face was a mask of desperate tears. "You don't understand, Nathan. We needed the money," she cried, her voice cracking as she reached for a napkin to blot her eyes. "You were deployed, and your salary wasn't enough to cover everything. I had debts from before we got married that were piling up. I was drowning." Nathan felt a roar of laughter bubbling up in his chest, but it was cold and devoid of humor. "Needed the money?" he shouted, his voice finally breaking through the controlled mask. "We had a beautiful house, Elena. We had food on the table, clothes on our backs, and a daughter who was happy. You're telling me you sold children for what? A new SUV? A trip to the coast? A designer bag? I didn't think anyone would get hurt," she shrieked back, her hands shaking so hard she dropped her coffee cup. "Mom told me it was safe. She said it was just tough love. I believed her when she said the kids who didn't come back had just run away to live on their own." "Run away." Nathan stepped closer, his shadow falling over her like a shroud. "You thought troubled 7- and 8-year-olds just walked away into the Oregon wilderness and their parents didn't care? You didn't think that was even a little suspicious?" Elena had no answer. She just sat there, sobbing into her hands. "For children are dead, Elena," Nathan said, his voice dropping back into that deadly, flat tone. "4. And I'm going to make sure the FBI knows every single name you gave to your mother. Every single parent you lied to." "Please, Nathan." She reached out to grab his sleeve, but he backed away as if her touch were poisonous. "I made a mistake. I was greedy and stupid. I know that now, but I'm still Lily's mother. I love her." "You sent her to a torture camp for $5,000, he replied, his eyes narrowing. "Don't ever say you love her again. If I see you near her, I will have the police arrest you on the spot. You're about to be charged with conspiracy, child endangerment, and likely trafficking. The only reason you're not in handcuffs right now is because you're still talking to the feds." He turned toward the door, where Melody was standing with her arms crossed, her eyes wet with tears of her own. "Melody, thanks for being honest," Nathan said quietly. "I'm so sorry, Nathan," Melody whispered. "I should have looked closer. I should have asked more questions. Don't blame yourself for the evil of others," Nathan told her before walking out into the crisp afternoon air. As he climbed into his truck, his phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. "Nathan Cross," he answered. "This is Special Agent Julian Moreno from the FBI," a voice said on the other end. "I need you to come into our field office for a formal interview today. And Mr. Cross, bring a lawyer." Am I being charged? Nathan asked, his hand tightening on the wheel. No, Moreno replied. But we're building a massive case under the RICO Act. Organized crime, conspiracy, and murder. This is much bigger than just your mother-in-law. We're going after the entire network. But you should know, your wife is a primary target. She's looking at significant prison time. I don't care what happens to her, Nathan said firmly. Just make sure you catch everyone else. We're trying, Mr. Cross. But watch your back. The people involved in this have deep pockets and a lot of connections. They won't go down without a fight. Nathan hung up and made a quick call to an old friend from his unit, Thomas Pena, who was now a high-powered attorney in the city. Thomas, I need help. I need the best family lawyer you know, and I need a federal defense strategist. My life just became a crime scene. While he waited for Thomas to call back, Nathan felt something shifting inside him. The raw, hot rage he had felt in the backyard was still there, but it was being channeled into something colder and more calculating. The army had spent 12 years teaching him how to plan, how to observe, and how to dismantle complex organizations in hostile territory. He realized he wasn't just a victim here. He was the most dangerous person these people had ever encountered. They thought they were safe because they had money and friends in high places. They were wrong. Nathan Cross was coming for them, and he didn't lose. An hour later, Nathan sat in a sterile, fluorescent-lit room at the FBI office. Across from him were Agent Moreno and a woman named Sarah Lowry. I'm Agent Lowry, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Caitlin was my niece. Nathan's expression softened for a brief moment. I'm so sorry for your loss, Agent. I found her tag. I want you to know this is personal for me, she said, leaning forward. We're going to make every person involved pay. We need your statement. Everything. From the moment you pulled into your driveway. Nathan told them everything. He described the freezing mud, the look in Lily's eyes, and the confession Elena had made in Melody's kitchen. As he talked, Agent Lowry pulled out a folder. We've identified 17 families your wife referred to the Blackwood property, Lowry said, sliding a list across the table. Of those 17 kids, 3 are confirmed dead. 4 are still missing. The others, we're finding them now. The stories are all the same. Extreme physical abuse, starvation, and being kept in those holes for days at a time. One boy was left in a pit for 3 straight days. Nathan felt a wave of nausea hit him again. Where are the parents now? Most of them are horrified, Moreno said. They thought their kids were at a legitimate boarding school. But a few of them, he paused, looking down at his notes. A few of them seemed to have known exactly what was happening. They're facing conspiracy and child endangerment charges. And Arthur Blackwood? Nathan asked. Moreno's jaw tightened. That's where it gets complicated. Arthur is a sitting judge with a lot of powerful friends. We need an airtight case before we can move on him. If we move too fast and he gets off on a technicality, he walks free forever. Children died while you guys built your case, Nathan said, his voice rising. We know, Lowry said, putting a hand on his arm to calm him. We're going to get him, but we have to do it right. Stay out of the investigation, Nathan, Moreno warned. Focus on your daughter. Let us handle the legal side. Nathan didn't respond to that. He had no intention of letting the system move at its own slow pace. After the interview, he met with Thomas Pena and a family law expert named Margaret Vance. The good news is you'll get full custody, Margaret said, her voice sharp and professional. With Elena facing federal charges and admitting to child endangerment, no judge in the state will give her rights. But the process will take months. I don't have months, Nathan said, and I don't care about the rules anymore. Elena and her mother played by their own rules while children were dying. He walked out to his truck and called Xavier. I need you to do something for me, Nathan said, and it's not going to be legal. I figured as much, Xavier replied. What do you need? Arthur Blackwood, Nathan said. I want everything on him. I want his phone records, his private emails, and his bank accounts. The FBI is waiting for warrants. I want it all tonight. You know what you're asking, Nathan? Xavier's voice was serious. If we get caught, it's all over. We won't get caught, Nathan said. You taught me how to do this in Afghanistan, remember? We're just applying those skills here. When do we start? Tonight, Nathan said. They met in a nondescript motel room with equipment that was definitely not civilian grade. Xavier sat at a laptop, his fingers flying across the keys. Arthur's home security is decent, but it's not top tier, Xavier explained. Standard Wi-Fi with a basic password. I can crack it remotely, but it'll take a few hours. While Xavier worked, Nathan researched Arthur's past. The man had been a judge for 15 years and a prosecutor before that. He lived in a modest house, nothing flashy. He's hiding the money, Nathan muttered. Offshore accounts, shell companies. Places the FBI can't find without months of paperwork. I'm in, Xavier said suddenly, his screen lighting up with windows of data. They spent the next several hours scrolling through Arthur's digital life. What they found made Nathan's blood run cold. There were spreadsheets listing every child who had ever been to the property, with detailed notes on which ones were problematic, and invoices for disposal services. These people had reduced children to lines in a ledger. Nathan stopped on one email from Arthur to Eleanor from 6 months ago. It read, "The Lowry girl is asking too many questions. Handle it." Eleanor's response was a single line. Resolved. No loose ends. Caitlin died because she asked questions, Nathan whispered, his voice shaking with a combination of horror and clarity. Send me all of this, Nathan ordered Xavier. Encrypt it. Multiple backups. If anything happens to me, or if the FBI's case falls apart, I want this released to every news outlet in the country. I'll make sure the whole world knows what they did. Xavier looked at him, his expression grim. You're playing a dangerous game, Nathan. They played a dangerous game with the lives of children, Nathan replied. Now it's my turn. Over the next week, Nathan felt like he was living two separate lives. In one life, he was a father sitting on the floor of a safe house apartment, helping Lily color in books and trying to pretend that the world wasn't a terrifying place. He watched her closely, noting every time she flinched at a loud noise or refused to be in a room alone. The therapist they had started seeing said that Lily was making progress, but the scars were deep. Nathan knew all about scars. He had his own from years of combat, both the ones you could see and the ones you couldn't. He knew you don't just get over trauma. You just learn how to carry the weight of it. In his other life, Nathan was a hunter. He spent his nights with Xavier, combing through the digital files they had pulled from Arthur Blackwood's network. The things they found were enough to make a seasoned soldier lose his stomach. Arthur and Eleanor hadn't just been running a discipline camp. They had been running a high-priced silencing service for the wealthy elite. They found evidence that powerful people, politicians, CEOs, and businessmen, had sent their children to the path of guidance, not because the kids were troubled, but because they had discovered their parents' darkest secrets. These were kids who knew about embezzled funds, affairs, or corporate crimes, and their parents had paid Eleanor to break them so they would never speak. One afternoon, Nathan met with Margaret Vance, the family lawyer Thomas had recommended. They sat in a glass-walled conference room that overlooked the city, a sharp contrast to the grit of the mountains. The good news is that no judge will give Elena custody right now, Margaret said, sliding a stack of legal documents across the table. Given her involvement in the recruitment and the fact that she's facing federal charges, your case for full custody is ironclad. But we have to follow the process. I'm filing emergency motions tomorrow to terminate her parental rights permanently. Do it, Nathan said, his voice cold. She doesn't get to see Lily again. Not after what she did. As he left the lawyer's office and walked toward his truck, his phone rang. It was an unknown number. Mr. Cross, a woman's voice asked. She sounded smooth, professional, and entirely too calm. My name is Ingrid Holt. I'm calling on behalf of a group of concerned citizens who wish to resolve the current situation regarding Eleanor Blackwood's property discreetly. Nathan stopped in his tracks, his eyes scanning the parking lot. And who are these concerned citizens? They are families who want to ensure this matter is handled in a way that doesn't cause unnecessary harm to innocent people, she said. We are prepared to offer you a settlement of $5 million in exchange for your cooperation and your silence. Nathan felt a surge of pure, icy disgust. Innocent people? Your clients murdered children to keep their secrets. You think $5 million makes that go away? That is a very serious accusation, Mr. Cross, she replied, her voice cooling, and one you cannot prove. I suggest you think very carefully before you reject this offer. $5 million is a lot of money for a retired soldier with a young daughter to raise. I don't need to think, Nathan snapped. The answer is no. I'm going to make sure the whole world knows exactly who your concerned citizens are. He hung up and immediately called Agent Moreno at the FBI to report the bribe attempt. He could hear the frustration in Moreno's voice. The feds were moving, but they were bound by the very rules that men like Arthur Blackwood knew how to manipulate. Nathan knew he needed more than just digital files. He needed a human witness who wasn't Eleanor. He reached out to a man named Raphael Thorne, whose name had appeared in the recruitment records Elena had kept. They met at a crowded diner where the noise of the breakfast rush provided a layer of privacy. Raphael was a single father who looked like he hadn't slept in a year. He told Nathan how his son had been sent to the mountain for discipline and had returned a different child, silent, fearful, and prone to screaming in his sleep about the holes. I didn't know, Raphael said, his voice shaking as he clutched a coffee mug. Elena told me it was tough love. She showed me testimonials. I was desperate. My son was acting out after his mother passed away, and I thought I was helping him. How did you pay? Nathan asked. To a firm called Behavioral Solutions, Raphael said. They handled all the paperwork. That was the link Nathan needed. Behavioral Solutions was the shell company Xavier had identified. Nathan tracked the firm back to a high-powered corporate lawyer in the city named Bennett Prescott. Prescott was the man who had built the legal walls that kept the money hidden and the investigations at bay. The next day, Nathan didn't wait for the FBI to get a warrant. He walked straight into Prescott's sleek, modern office suite. He ignored the protests of the secretary and walked into the inner office where Bennett Prescott sat behind a mahogany desk, looking every bit like the untouchable elite he served. Who are you? You can't be in here, Prescott said, his voice dripping with annoyance. I'm Nathan Cross, Nathan said, closing the door and leaning against it. And you're the man who laundered millions of dollars for a murder camp. Nathan dropped a folder onto the desk. It contained the spreadsheets Xavier had found, the bank transfers, and the names of the shell companies. Prescott's expression shifted from annoyance to a carefully neutral mask. I set up legal corporate structures for my clients, Prescott said smoothly. What they do with those structures is not my concern. It's protected by attorney-client privilege. Privilege doesn't cover being an accomplice to murder, Nathan said, leaning forward. I know about the Permanent Solutions files, Prescott. I know you helped bury the evidence when kids didn't survive the discipline. Prescott didn't flinch, but Nathan saw his hand twitch toward a pen on his desk. You have no proof. Now, get out before I call security. I have more than proof, Nathan said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous level. I did some research on you, Bennett. I saw you have a 15-year-old son, Bennett Jr. From what I hear, he's been in some trouble lately. Minor legal stuff, some therapy. Prescott's face went deathly pale. Don't you dare mention my son. I'm not threatening him, Nathan said, his eyes hard as flint. I'm asking you how you'd feel if someone sent him to a place like Eleanor Blackwood's. How would you feel if he ended up in a hole in the ground, crying for his father, while you were busy making sure the person who put him there got paid? Prescott was shaking now, the polished mask finally shattering. The FBI will be here tomorrow with warrants, Nathan said, standing up. You can cooperate and maybe keep your life, or you can go down with the Blackwoods. Your choice. He walked out, knowing he had broken the man. True to his word, Prescott called the FBI 48 hours later. He wanted to cut a deal. With his cooperation, the financial wall collapsed. The FBI launched coordinated raids, arresting not just Eleanor and Arthur, but also the state senator, the CEO of the pharmaceutical company, and the local businessman Nathan had identified in his surveillance. They also picked up Phyllis Vance in Florida and 2 local officers who had taken bribes to bury complaints. It was the biggest child trafficking and conspiracy bust in the state's history. Nathan watched the news coverage from the safe house, seeing the faces of the people who had thought they were gods being led into courtrooms in handcuffs. But Nathan wasn't celebrating yet. 2 of the wealthiest parents, men who had paid for permanent solutions to silence their own children, had skipped bail and disappeared. Agent Moreno called Nathan that night. "We think they've fled the country, Nathan. But they know you're the reason they lost everything. They're desperate and they might try to retaliate. You need to move Lily again." Nathan looked at his daughter, who was finally sleeping peacefully. He realized that as long as these men were free, Lily would never truly be safe. He called Xavier. "I need you to take Lily somewhere they can never find her," Nathan said. "Somewhere far away from Oregon." "I have a cousin with a ranch in Montana," Xavier said immediately. "Middle of nowhere. No one would ever think to look there." "Can you leave at dawn?" Nathan asked. "We'll be gone before the sun is up," Xavier promised. The next morning, Nathan explained to Lily that she was going on a special vacation with Uncle Xavier to see the mountains and the horses. She looked scared, clutching Nathan's hand. "Why can't you come, Daddy?" she asked. "I have to finish some work here." "Baby?" Nathan said, kneeling to kiss her forehead. "But I'll come get you as soon as I'm done. I promise." He watched Xavier's truck disappear down the street, feeling a hollow ache in his chest. He was alone now, and he had 2 targets left to find. With Lily safely tucked away at a ranch in the vast, open plains of Montana, Nathan felt a strange, cold emptiness settle over him. For the first time in weeks, the immediate fear for his daughter's life was replaced by a sharp, focused mission. He was back in his element, but the stakes were more personal than any operation he had ever led in the Army. He stayed behind in Oregon, but he didn't stay in the house he once shared with Elena. That place was haunted by betrayal. Instead, he moved between motels, always watching his back, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The other shoe came in the form of a late-night phone call from Agent Moreno. The news was exactly what Nathan had feared. Harrison Thorne and Bennett Prescott Sr., 2 of the wealthiest and most dangerous men involved in the conspiracy, had skipped their bail and vanished. They were powerful men with the kind of resources that could buy silence, fake passports, and a clean escape. "They're gone, Nathan," Moreno said, his voice tight with frustration. "We think they've fled the country. Interpol is already on high alert, but if they're smart, they could be anywhere by now." "They aren't just running, Moreno," Nathan replied, his voice a low growl. "They're desperate, and desperate men like that don't just disappear. They try to settle scores." Moreno warned him to stay in hiding, telling him that the FBI would handle the search. But Nathan knew better. He knew how the system worked, or rather, how it failed. He knew that while the FBI was filing paperwork for international warrants, Thorne and Prescott were likely planning their next move. He couldn't sit and wait for them to find Lily. He called Xavier, who was still in Montana keeping watch over the ranch. Nathan didn't have to explain much. Xavier understood the language of threat better than anyone. "I've been doing some digging of my own off the books," Xavier told him a few days later. "I tapped into some of Thorne's older shell company records, the stuff Prescott hadn't even fully disclosed to the feds yet. I found something interesting." "What is it?" Nathan asked, leaning forward in his darkened motel room. "Thorne's family owns a property in a remote corner of Alaska," Xavier said. "It's off the grid, reachable only by bush plane, and it wasn't listed on any of his recent financial disclosures. It's the perfect place to hide out while their lawyers try to quietly dismantle the charges back home." "They aren't in Europe," Nathan realized. "They're still in the country, just buried deep in the woods." "Exactly," Xavier said. "The charges aren't going to just go away, but these guys think they can outlast the media cycle. They think they can live like kings in the wilderness until the heat dies down." Nathan felt a surge of cold adrenaline. "That isn't justice, Xavier." "No, it isn't," Xavier agreed. There was a pause on the line, an understanding between two men who had spent years operating outside the normal lines of civil society. If someone were to find them, someone not bound by FBI jurisdiction, they could persuade them to turn themselves in. "A ranger is dangerous in the woods, Xavier," Nathan said. "Let's go get them." Nathan flew to Alaska the next day, meeting Xavier at a small, windswept airfield outside of Fairbanks. They hired a bush pilot who didn't ask questions to fly them into the remote interior. The pilot dropped them on a gravel bar 10 miles from the coordinates Xavier had pulled from the Thorne family records. "You guys sure about this?" the pilot asked, looking at their tactical gear and the vast, unforgiving wilderness surrounding them. "We're sure," Nathan said. "Pick us up right here in 3 days." The hike was brutal. The Alaskan wilderness in the late autumn was a world of thick, tangled forests, icy rivers, and jagged mountain passes. It was the kind of terrain that tested every bit of their survival training. But Nathan felt a strange sense of peace. He wasn't a victim here. He wasn't a grieving father or a betrayed husband. He was a predator on a trail. On the second day, they found the property. It was a large, modern cabin perched on the edge of a pristine lake, powered by solar panels and hidden by the dense tree line. Nathan pulled out his binoculars and watched as smoke curled from the chimney. He saw 2 vehicles parked near a shed and, eventually, a man stepped out onto the porch. It was Harrison Thorne. "They're here," Xavier whispered, checking his own gear. Nathan studied the cabin's layout. He wasn't there for a firefight. He was there for an extraction. "We move in tonight," Nathan decided. "Non-lethal unless we have no choice. We secure them, call Moreno with the satellite phone, and wait for the FBI to handle the paperwork for the extraction." They waited until 2 a.m., the same hour Nathan had first pulled into his driveway to find the house dark and empty. Using night vision goggles, they approached the cabin from different angles, moving through the brush like ghosts. The cabin was dark, and the men inside felt so safe in their remote fortress that they hadn't even bothered to lock the front door. Nathan entered first. The interior was luxurious, expensive leather furniture and high-end appliances that looked out of place in the middle of the woods. He moved silently down the hallway and found Thorne asleep in the master bedroom. Before the man could even register a shadow in the room, Nathan had him on his stomach, his hands zip-tied behind his back. "What? Who are you?" Thorne stammered, his face pressed into the pillow. "Keep your mouth shut," Nathan whispered, his voice as cold as the Alaskan night. "Make one sound, and I'll knock you out." Xavier had already secured Bennett Prescott Sr. in the living room. They sat the 2 men on the plush sofa, the glow of a single lamp casting long, jagged shadows against the walls. "Do you know who we are?" Nathan asked, standing over them. "You're cross?" Prescott spat, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and arrogance. "The soldier. You're the one who ruined our lives." "I'm the one who exposed you for what you are," Nathan corrected. "I'm the one who found the graves of the children you paid to have silenced." "That isn't true," Thorne pleaded, his eyes darting around the room. "We didn't murder anyone. We just wanted our children to be better. You sent them to be tortured and killed because they discovered your crimes," Nathan said, leaning in so close that Thorne could see the reflection of his own fear in Nathan's eyes. "You valued your reputations more than the lives of your own children. My son. He was going to destroy me," Thorne whispered, his face crumbling. "He found evidence of my embezzlement and my affairs. He was going to report me to the board. I had no choice." "There is always a choice," Nathan said, "and you chose wrong. And now you're going to pay for it." "You can't prove anything in a real court," Prescott tried to bluster. "Our lawyers will have the evidence thrown out. You're holding us illegally." "I don't need to prove anything," Nathan said. "The FBI has the testimony of Arthur Blackwood and the financial records Prescott's own firm handed over. They have the bodies from the mountain. You're going to prison for the rest of your lives." "We have resources," Prescott said, though his voice was losing its edge. "We have friends in high places." "Not anymore," Nathan said. "Your friends are already cutting deals." The state senator and the CEO are already cooperating. You're the last rats on a sinking ship. Nathan pulled out the satellite phone and handed it to Prescott. Now you have a choice. You can call Moreno and surrender voluntarily, which might buy you a slightly better deal. Or I can leave you here, tied up, and tell the local wolves where to find a meal. Either way, you're going back. The two men looked at each other, the reality of their situation finally sinking in. They were thousands of miles from their lawyers and their influence. They were in a room with a man who had nothing left to lose and all the skills to make their lives a living hell. What kind of deal? Thorne asked softly. You testify against everyone else, Nathan said. Every name, every bribe, every crime. Maybe they give you 20 years instead of life. It's more than your children got. Prescott took the phone and dialed the number Nathan provided. Nathan watched as the men who had thought they were untouchable finally surrendered. The FBI arrived in helicopters 2 days later, extracting the fugitives from the remote lake. Nathan and Xavier watched from the edge of the trees as the black aircraft lifted off, the thrum of the rotors echoing through the valley. Mission accomplished? Xavier asked, looking at Nathan. Not yet, Nathan replied. Not until every one of them is behind bars. They flew back to Montana the next day. When Nathan walked through the door of the ranch house, Lily ran across the room and threw her arms around his waist. I missed you, Daddy, she whispered into his shirt. I missed you too, baby, Nathan said, picking her up and holding her close. So much. Can we go home now? She asked. Nathan looked at Xavier, who gave a small nod. The immediate threat was gone. The fugitives were in custody, and the rest of the network was too busy trying to save themselves to worry about a 7-year-old girl. Yes, baby, Nathan said, a small, genuine smile finally touching his face. We can go home. Nathan and Lily returned to their house in Oregon about a week after the fugitives were caught. Walking through the front door was strange. The house felt hollow and quiet without Elena there, but Lily didn't seem to mind the silence. She walked straight to her room, touching her old toys and books as if making sure they were still real. For her, the house wasn't a place of shared memories with a spouse. It was a sanctuary where her father had finally brought her back to safety. Nathan knew they couldn't just pick up where they left off. He moved quickly to give Lily a fresh start, enrolling her in a different school further away from their neighborhood, a place where the teachers and other parents didn't know her name from the morning news. He also made sure therapy became a permanent part of their routine, taking her twice a week to help her process the horrors of the reflection garden. Slowly, painfully, they began to piece together a new version of a normal life. The legal storm, however, was just beginning. 6 months after Nathan had pulled Lily out of that freezing pit, the trials finally commenced. Eleanor Blackwood was the first to face the court. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. They presented physical evidence from the graves, heart-wrenching testimony from the children who had survived, and the financial ledgers that proved her retreat was a for-profit criminal enterprise. Eleanor's lawyers tried to argue that she was simply a strict disciplinarian whose methods had been misunderstood, or that she had been pressured by her brother Arthur. The jury didn't believe a word of it. She was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. Arthur Blackwood's trial followed shortly after. He sat at the defense table looking like a shadow of the powerful judge he had once been. He tried to paint himself as a victim of his sister's manipulation, but once his own recorded discussions about permanent solutions were played for the court, his defense collapsed. He, too, received a life sentence with no hope of parole. The rest of the inner circle fell like dominoes. Phyllis Vance, the social worker, received 20 years. The corrupt deputy, Carlos Reed, got 15. And the state supervisor, Christina Vance, was sentenced to 10 years for her role in the cover-up. For Nathan, the hardest trial to endure was Elena's. He sat in the back of the courtroom every day, watching the woman he had once loved describe her desperation for money and her claims that she had believed her mother's lies. But the prosecutor was relentless, showing the jury the recordings of Elena promoting the program to other parents and detailing the $100,000 she had pocketed from the misery of others. Lily didn't have to face her mother in person. The lawyers agreed that her video deposition was enough to spare her further trauma. Nathan watched as the jury returned a guilty verdict for conspiracy to commit child abuse. Elena was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison, with a requirement to serve at least 3 before she could even ask for parole. The trials for the wealthy parents dragged on for another year, fueled by the testimony of Thorne and Prescott, who gave up everyone to save themselves. By the time the dust settled, 23 people had been convicted in connection with the conspiracy. They were sentenced to hundreds of combined years in prison and ordered to pay millions in restitution to the families of the victims. But while the headlines focused on the prison sentences, Nathan's focus remained on the quiet victories happening at home. He watched Lily's nightmares fade from every night to once a week, then once a month. He saw her start to smile again, to make jokes, and to play with her new friends without looking over her shoulder. She was surviving, and more than that, she was starting to thrive. 2 years after the rescue, Nathan found himself back in a courtroom for one final hearing. This time, it wasn't a criminal trial. It was family court. The judge, a woman who had spent weeks reviewing every detail of the case, looked down at Nathan and Lily with a soft expression. "Mr. Cross, you have done an admirable job raising your daughter under truly horrific circumstances," the judge said. "This court finds you to be a fit and devoted father. The parental rights of Elena Cross are hereby permanently terminated. Full legal and physical custody is awarded to you." Lily squeezed Nathan's hand, her eyes shining. "Does that mean Mommy can never take me back? Ever?" she whispered. "Ever?" Nathan promised her. "You're mine forever." That night, they held a small, private celebration at home with pizza, ice cream, and Lily's favorite movie. It was just the two of them, exactly as it had been for the last 2 years. During the movie, Lily leaned against him and whispered, "Thank you for saving me, Daddy." Nathan pulled her into a hug, feeling a lump form in his throat. "You don't have to thank me, Lily. That's what daddies are for." "Not all daddies," Lily said quietly. "Some of those other kids, their daddies were the bad guys." "I know," Nathan said, his voice heavy with the thought of those who didn't make it. "And I'm so sorry they didn't have someone to protect them. But you made sure those people were punished. You made sure they couldn't hurt anyone else." "You won, Daddy," Lily said. Nathan thought about that as he tucked her into bed later that night. He had won, but the victory had come at a staggering cost. His marriage was gone. His daughter's childhood had been scarred, and several families would never see their children again. But as he looked at Lily, healthy and safe in her own bed, he knew it was enough. Justice had been served, and the monsters were locked away forever. 5 years had passed since the morning the mountain estate was dismantled and the dark secrets of the Blackwood family were brought into the light. Nathan and Lily had moved away from that old life, settling into a new house in a much better neighborhood. It was a smaller, sun-drenched place, situated closer to Lily's school so she could walk with her friends. The yard was filled with gardens they had planted together, and there were no dark, hidden corners to fear anymore. Lily was 12 years old now, and she had grown into a tall, confident young woman who surprised Nathan every single day with her resilience. She was the captain of her middle school soccer team, a leader on the field who played with a fierce determination that reminded Nathan of the best soldiers he had ever known. To look at her now, laughing with her teammates or focused on her homework, you would never guess the trauma she had endured in those cold Oregon mountains. The nightmares that used to wake her up screaming were rare now, appearing only once every few months like a fading ghost of a past life. One Saturday afternoon, Marcus Reed came over for their regular monthly barbecue. Marcus had retired from the police force a couple of years ago, finally walking away from the badge after decades of service. He had told Nathan that the Blackwood case had fundamentally changed him. He had become disillusioned with a legal system that had allowed such a deep, organized conspiracy to operate for so long right under their noses. Now, he spent his time fishing and checking in on the Cross family, who had become the closest thing he had to kin. As the sun began to dip behind the pines, Marcus and Nathan stood by the grill, the smell of charcoal and burgers filling the air. They watched Lily in the backyard, playing fetch with the neighbor's golden retriever. She looked healthy, happy, And most importantly, safe. She's doing great, Nathan, Marcus said, leaning against the porch railing. Straight A's, captain of the team. She's really thrived. She is, Nathan agreed, though his expression grew thoughtful as he flipped a burger. I actually got a letter from Elena last week. Marcus stiffened slightly. What did she have to say for herself? Nathan sighed, the weight of the past briefly settling on his shoulders. Elena, or Sasha as the world knew her, was still serving her time in federal prison. In her letter, she claimed she had been sober for over 2 years and expressed deep remorse for her role in her mother's scheme. She wrote that she was eligible for parole the following year and that she wanted to see Lily once she was out. What are you going to do? Marcus asked. I'm going to tell Lily about the letter, Nathan replied firmly. She's old enough now to understand the truth and make her own choice. If she wants to see her mother, I won't stop her. If she never wants to hear that name again, I'll honor that too. Marcus nodded, respecting the decision. They ate in a comfortable, quiet silence for a while, enjoying the peace that they had fought so hard to secure. But as the evening grew cooler, the conversation turned back to the ghosts of the past. Marcus spoke about the children who hadn't been as lucky as Lily, the ones like Caitlin and Jaden, whose stories had ended in that mountain backyard. I wonder what they'd be doing now if they'd had a chance to grow up, Marcus whispered, his face grim in the twilight. I think about it every day, Nathan admitted. We made sure their deaths meant something, Marcus. We made sure no one could look away from what happened. The trials were long over, and the people responsible were rotting in cells across the country. Eleanor and Arthur were never coming out, and the wealthy parents who had paid to silence their own children had been exposed to the world. Justice had been served as best as the world could manage. But Nathan knew the truth. He knew that even though they had destroyed the New Horizons conspiracy, evil of that kind was never truly defeated. It lived in the shadows of other towns, under different names, fueled by the same greed and the same willingness to sacrifice the innocent for power. He had spent the last 5 years making sure Lily was prepared for a world like that, teaching her to be tough, compassionate, and smart. Lily had even started volunteering at a local children's shelter, helping younger kids who had survived their own traumas. She told Nathan that helping them helped her process what she had gone through. Watching her work with those kids made Nathan prouder than anything he had ever achieved as a soldier in the army. After Marcus had gone home and Lily was tucked safely in bed, Nathan sat on the back porch with his phone in his hand. A message from Xavier Holt popped up on the screen. Xavier was still working his connections, always keeping an eye on the darker corners of the country. Did you see the news out of the South? The message read, another case very similar to ours. I thought you should know. Nathan read the details Xavier had sent, his jaw tightening as the old familiar feeling of a mission began to stir in his chest. He looked back toward the house, where Lily was sleeping peacefully, and then back at the phone. He knew that the fight never truly ended. Someone had to stand up for the children who couldn't fight for themselves. Someone had to be the one to step into the dark and pull them back into the light. Nathan Cross had done it once, and as he typed a reply to Xavier, he knew he would do it again. He would always be that person, for Lily, for the ones they had lost, and for the ones who were still waiting to be found. He had won the battle for his daughter's life, and he would win the next one, too.